Welcome to our session today on solving revenue management pain points. And my name is James Taylor. I am not the famous singer. I am a product manager at ReSource Pro, and my day-to-day work involves how inflows of premium become booked revenue for our clients. So it's a pleasure being a product manager. My favorite part is to hear from you, and we hope to do some of that today. And before we do that, I'll turn it over to Brenda for her intro.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. I'm Brenda Grow, and I'm in our solutions team. I help people understand the various solutions that ReSource Pro has. I've been here 10 years, but I also spent 30 years at a retail agency. So I've been in your seats before, and so it's great to be able to share this with you today. So before we get started, raise your hand if you've ever worked in accounting, please. Got a couple? Raise your hand if you've ever dealt with anybody that works in accounting. So I think this session will be relevant for everyone, even if you're not in that financial department. What we're talking about is revenue management. And so I just want to spend a minute on this Insurance 101, and just in case, just to give you a refresher, and how we look at what revenue management is. With accounting, you've got the inflows and you've got the outflows. So what we're talking about here is agency bill, how to handle that function, direct bill commission, reconciliation, receiving those statements, getting them in your system, and also contingent intelligence. We had a product before called Carrier Insights. We've now rebranded as Contingency Intelligence, right? And that is helping you to evaluate and forecast and budget for your contingent bonuses that come in. Then there's the outflows. You've got to pay people, you've got to pay producers, you've got to pay carriers, and you also get that retained revenue that keeps your agency afloat. We're talking about that middle piece, and I was thinking about it with the ins and outs. I'm a California. What's the best burger in California? In-N-Out. We're talking about making that burger. So that's what we're going to be spending time on today. As we talk, if you have questions, you can shout them out or you can save them to the end as well. So what are we talking about? What is the pain with, what are the challenges with the accounting function? James gave us this quote, "A problem stated is a problem half solved." It's very important to evaluate. Sometimes it's not a problem, it's a symptom. So going back and determining what's the symptom, what's the eventual pain is a great journey to go on. We've talked to a lot of clients about these things, and they've come up with some common pain points, some of the headaches that they have in the agency. Operational silos and low visibility. You get statements from all different places in all different ways, and it's really hard to consolidate that data to be meaningful for you. You've got inaccuracies, you've got E&O risks. If you miss paying a carrier and that policy cancels, that's a problem for the agency. Lack of standardization within carriers because, of course, every statement looks different. And your customer feels the pain because of stuff that happens if the accounting function is not smooth. You'll notice on your table there are craft sticks and there are markers. We'd love you to take a few seconds or a few minutes to go think about what pain points have you seen, either agreeing with the ones that we've got here or any ones that we have not mentioned. James is going to walk around and kind of pick up a couple so that we can talk through them. And then if you can't think of any now and you think of some later, we invite you to go ahead and write them out throughout the presentation because, again, we want to make sure that we're developing a solution that's going to meet the needs that you have. And also through this talk, we'd like to see what you're thinking of.
Let's take a look at what we've got here. We have accountability and the lack of accountability, right? So this probably also goes to this concept of being able to visualize data. We'll talk about that later. Incorrect producer commissions.
Yeah, they don't like that, right?
We have one here that just says agency bill. So that's, I think, a common, yes. A common understanding that agency bill is quite complex and it can be quite messy. So we'll talk more about those processes. And let's see what else we've got here. So One of them says, does not have time to play golf. So
No.
too busy for golf, right? So yeah, that's again, those are real pain points for people, and let's talk more about how we can solve those today. And one way, of course, we can approach this is through technology and using AI. And AI is something that's really, of course, changing the game today. By the end of this session, we really want you to leave the session with an understanding of how AI is helping us in these agency bill and direct bill processes. This is a basic accounting workflow here that involves AI. And typically what AI is doing in the first step is it's doing sort of an intake and a triage of documents, classifying documents and routing them to the correct location in your workflow. The next step is typically to try to match information from those routed documents to data from your AMS system. So that is kind of the second part here, is for AI to link the incoming documents with your AMS data. And the third step here is to handle the invoices in the case of agency bill, or in the case of direct bill, to handle that statement reconciliation where we're actually matching between your data and the data that you're receiving from the carrier statements. And the end result of all of this is that we want to avoid any kind of unintended consequences, such as cancellations, as well as to avoid any unapplied cash in the case of direct bill. And this is something that AI really works through a couple of different processes here that I'll mention. The first one is it has to recognize the documents. It has to be able to recognize, is this an endorsement? Is this a direct bill statement? And once it does that part of it, the next part is the data extraction and the data matching. So we'll show you a little bit of the details on that. So let's first talk about how AI is extracting data from statements, for example. This would be a direct bill use case. And we've got an example direct bill statement up on the screen for you there. And this is the extraction process is something where we have certain challenges that are both human challenges and technology challenges that we find with the statements. The first one might be that the statements may have watermarks on them. It would be hard for AI to read that. There could be format changes from the carrier, where the carrier has changed their statement format, and that's something that AI would need to learn the new format in that case. And one last example for you, if you look at this statement, you can see how it does have headers, for example, on the first page. If you went to the second page of that statement, it may not have headers. It may not have a total at the bottom. It may only have a total on the last page. And so, again, these are challenges for AI to kind of overcome the fact that these statements may not be consistent from page to page. That's, again, part of the learning process. And in terms of what AI is typically looking to extract from the documents, it's looking, of course, for policy numbers, lines of business. It's looking for the policy term, and it's looking for lots of things that could be a little bit different. If we take the employee benefits example, an employee benefits policy may use the group number, and so the AI would have to be able to sort of understand that group number is actually policy number in this example here. So that's the extraction part of things.
I thought of it's more with policy checking, because that's my bread and butter, as most of you know. When we have been working with our AI, I was looking at some of the results, and on GL policy, the location was the mailing address, then there was a location on the deck, there was a location on the exposure schedule. There was an error on that location. AI came back with 3 errors, even though we know that's 1 error. So, this is some of the extraction. It wasn't really an error, it was just an inconvenience that we like to work through.
So let's talk now about the matching process. Again, we have to extract the data first, and then we have to take that data and match it to your system of record. And here we have a bit of a matching challenge. This is what the AI would be faced with, and this is what people are faced with as well when they're doing this process. So you see there's a carrier statement and your AMS data, probably the insured. You can see that's pretty close, right? And so the AI would probably get that one correct pretty easily. But if we look at something like the policy number here, That is probably more challenging. And so we've got a Texas policy. Probably the AI would understand that that is a Texas policy. But would it make that match between the AMS and the statement on the first try? Probably not. It would probably take a person to connect those two policy numbers for the first time, and then at that point, the AI would know from here on out, when I see this policy, I know what it is. I can auto match this. I don't need a person to do it. So the way that the technology has changed is that the technology before AI could do some of this, it could attempt to do some of this, but it was really looking at characters, it was looking at letters, it was looking at numbers. It didn't have an understanding of meaning. It didn't know what a policy number was. It only knew the characters. So it was a bit comparable to something like a spell checker, right? And with the AI, we've brought this concept of meaning in where it knows, it understands what a policy number is, what the policy terms are. And so it's able to take those different data points and not just look at one of them to try to make a match, but it looks at all of the data points holistically. And as it assesses all of those, it comes to one conclusion. Am I confident that this is a match overall, or does this need some sort of human review? And it does that based on a confidence score that it does for its analysis. So this is where we'd like to start talking with you about people and the role of people. I do want to tell you that I'm a history buff. Personally, I'm really into history, and I really find the history of AI to be quite fascinating. So before we turn to the role of people, I wanted to ask you, would you be surprised if I told you that AI actually dates back in its origins, in its ideas, to the 1950s? That is the history of AI, is that even in the late 40s and the early 50s, the concepts behind what we know today were already being thought out, and the mathematics behind it was already being worked on. And it was really only in the last couple of years that we've had the other two key ingredients. We've had the processors that are now powerful enough to handle this kind of processing, and we also have huge volumes of electronic data, right? So those are the three keys. You had to have the data, the processors, as well as what's really under the hood for AI. It's a lot of fancy math. That is really what is under the hood of everything, right? So we now have those three parts of the recipe in place. And this is a quote from what a person that some people would consider the father of AI or the father of machine learning. And what he's saying in this quote, it's a little bit, maybe I'll kind of translate what he's saying, is that for for a machine to learn, it has to make mistakes. And this is what this person was thinking about, a mathematician back in the 1950s, is the concept of, can machines think? And if so, they could only do so if they're actually able to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So, as you all probably would agree, AI in 2026 is not something that we can just turn over the keys and say it's doing its thing. We really do need to have people involved, and Brenda will tell us about that.
So who has raised a toddler here? I think of AI as a toddler. It wants to learn, it's eager to learn, but if you don't have somebody to teach it, they're going to touch the stove and then they're going to, have those problems themselves. And that's what we call experts in the loop or human in the loop, because somebody needs to be there to be the babysitter of the AI as it's learning and growing. So, technology excels at things that are equally matched, as James talked about those different matching errors. They're really great at pattern recognition, continuing to grow. As long as it gets feedback, it's going to learn and get better. Very efficient, gives you visibility into data because it's collecting all that data as it's doing its thing, gives you some audit trail, and it also flags it if it needs help to tie its shoe, it's going to say, "Help! I don't understand this. I need you to look at it." And so that is how humans and AI can work together. People, on the other hand, they can do those reviews. They can have intuition. They can teach different patterns. They can make judgment on those cases that might look a little funky and they need to do research on. It also, as I mentioned, gives that AI feedback. And we need people to do that design and maintenance. That's my friend James' job, to make sure that we're keeping up to date on what's going on with that machine and fixing anything that's going wrong, so that our humans or our experts have a better experience using the tool. So people are critical. I'm sure you've all heard the expression, AI is not going to take your job. The people that know how to use AI are going to be the ones that take your job. And so we think of it as a complementary kind of tool, not a replacement. So the critical role is we understand, we know you, we've been working with you all many years. My friend Belkis over there, over 20 years, I think we've been working with them. And so we understand your business so that we can help you bridge these gaps. We can also process at scale, of course, standardize delivery, triage and exceptions. They're always going to happen because there's always going to be those cases where it just doesn't match and it spits out and the machine needs help. And we are platform agnostic as well. It doesn't matter to us what AMS you use, what accounting system you use. We will help you to kind of integrate all of those pieces into a cohesive whole. And so your real-world results are that you'll get fewer errors, and that more errors will be caught, so you won't have that floating money that no one knows where to apply. I'm sure you've all had that problem. Efficient communication within a single platform. James has designed a beautiful dashboard so that you can see what's going on with your money's ins and outs. We'll help you clear exceptions so that at that end of the month, it's not a big scramble those last 2 days. Who's lived through that? Trying to figure out where is this money? We'll be working it consistently. And proven workflows with repeatable results. So what does success look like? At ReSource Pro, we are launching a new revenue management suite, which includes those inputs, direct bill, agency bill, and contingency intelligence, which is your old-fashioned carrier insights to help you decide what's going on with your contingency payments.
Let's talk a little bit about metrics, and we have to be able to measure it to manage it, right? So we've got some data visibility tools that we have developed, and a couple of different data points or metrics that we'd like to point out to you as especially important. We have, for example, the total amount of commission that is very visible to you. You can see an example of this on the screen, and that's something that if we look at the commission that we've received versus the commission that we've posted, it really allows us to track throughout the accounting period and make sure that we are on track for a clean close at the end of the month. Another metric here that we have is cycle time. So this is kind of interesting because in these workflows, you'll have different locations throughout your workflow from A to Z. And the cycle time measures the average time that it takes to transit right, from inbox to being posted, as well as we have the ability to point out statements that may be at risk. For example, in a direct bill type scenario, a statement that has a cycle time that's high, and so we're able to point that out at a time that maybe it wouldn't otherwise be recognized as something being at risk. We also have things like the auto match and the auto routing rates. And these are something that are really helpful for telling you the health of your AI. So how well is your AI doing? You always want to see those rates getting higher and higher because it means that the AI is learning more and more about your documents, more and more about your data. Another one to keep an eye on here that we have visually for you to see is something we call amount distribution. And this is something that as money moves through your workflows, you're able to actually see where the money is at, right? At what location is what amount. And so it really gives you a lot of ability to see into your workflow and what is happening there. And the last one I'd like to mention here is carrier performance metrics. So we really believe that you should have a view of how your carriers are performing, and we want to really give that holistically across both direct bill, agency bill, as well as the contingency commissions aspect of this. And so the carrier performance is something that sort of gives us a view of where things are going with this type of AI, and it's going more toward a projection into the future or a forecast that is based on something like predictive modeling. So that's the future of where things are going for this kind of reporting. And now I want to tell you about a couple of KPIs that you can look at as you onboard one of these new technologies. A couple of KPIs here. The first one for you to keep an eye on, of course, would be the cash applied rate when we're talking about direct bill. So how much of the commission that you're receiving ends up getting posted by the end of the month. We really like to see above 97% for sure, so that we're not having backlogs and we're really having a clean close. Another direct bill KPI to keep an eye on here, again, would be the auto match rate. And we're finding that when you start out with one of these technologies, you're probably going, and this really depends a lot on data, right? It depends on how clean your system of record, your AMS, how clean that data is and how consistent it is. But to give you an idea, when you first start out, you might see auto match rates for a direct bill scenario being somewhere around 40%. And as the AI sees these statements month after month, as the humans and the experts are making those connections when statements are a little bit unclear, when there's some judgment that's needed, the AI, of course, should always be getting better at what it does. And so we always want to see that rising to about 70% after 6 months, to give a number. And after a year, we definitely want to see you above 90 or in the 90s for the ability of AI to handle these different documents without human intervention. So let's look at two other KPIs a little bit more associated with agency bill side of things. So when it comes to the days to invoice, we'd like to see that as low as possible, and AI can really help to automate that. 2.5 days would be great, and that's something that, again, it really helps you stay ahead of your customer experience. So for those who are doing agency bill, you might have surplus lines that sort of force you to do that, or you might have customers who you really want to have control over that relationship with your customer, more a direct relationship. And so that customer experience comes into play, as well as things like unintended outcomes. So cancellations, for example, that were not intended and that happen under current workflows, we'd like to see that cancellation rate dropping, which is really an indication that your E&O risk is heading in the right direction. And this has to do with agency bill and direct bill being handled in totally separate systems, as well as handling these two operations oftentimes in spreadsheets. So sometimes we use the term spreadsheet spaghetti, and of course we really want to have reporting that takes it out of the spreadsheet, and everybody involved can really visualize things. We have a lack of standardization in these processes. So all of the different documents that you're receiving from carriers, all of the different invoices and such, are not standardized, and they probably will not be. That's one of the advantages of AI, is that it's able to use all of these different sort of disparate formats and learn each one of them. So we also find a lot of inaccurate things like E&O risk that result from cancellations, again, that you did not intend, and misapplied payments being another big problem that AI should be able to help you solve. The last pain point, again, that we've identified would be the strain on customer relationships. And this is one that may go a little bit under the radar. Yesterday, we had a speaker who talked a lot about friction. So you may not hear from your customer that they're unhappy with their experience, but that friction that can be caused by things like inefficiencies and not staying ahead of that relationship should really be improved as a result of this kind of technology. So again, what AI is doing, it's triaging those documents, it's classifying them, it is recognizing patterns within the documents, oftentimes with the help of an expert who's helping it make those connections that it then knows. It is extracting and matching data, and it is also detecting problems. So I think this is a big one for us to sort of wind down with, is this concept that while AI is very good at doing things correctly, AI is also, in this case, it is purposely built to detect when it doesn't have the right confidence and when an expert is really needed, and to notify you when attention is needed from a human. So Brenda will tell us a little bit more about the outcomes of that.
So the outcomes will be that faster close. I remember well, I mean, I was at an agency for 30 years. been here for 10, so you can understand when I was working in the Stone Age, I remember that especially like quarter end, year end closes were a nightmare. Our goal is to help you with those faster close with cleaner books, excuse me. Unified visibility, with the dashboard, with gathering the data. I mean, we're just barely breaking the surface of what data we can collect from working on your statements and so on. And James will continue to think about what can go on that dashboard so you can have the data available that you want to see about that process. And of course, we talk about the human validation. The confidence rating is going to tell the humans how often they need to double check so that you can make sure that everything is accurately done. And your customers are going to be happier because they're going to get their invoices on time. You're not going to send an invoice in 20 days and say, oh, you've got 2 days to pay this, that kind of thing. So we're hoping that with using AI, with our experts, with your experts, you're going to have happier customers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.